A few years back, France won the World Cup, the World Soccer Cup. My daughter-in-law is French, so there was a bit of a personal connection there, and I'm thinking, wow, France. I mean, you don't normally associate France with great sporting achievements, and wow, fantastic, the World Cup. A couple of days later, I saw a picture of the French team, and almost all the players were black. And of course, my feelings of joy and admiration for the French people kind of evaporated in a puff of smoke. It got me thinking about the word heritage. This is a word that's often used, not as much today as it probably was in the past, for reasons that I will explore in this video. Of course, my first thought was that however fine and creditworthy these black players were, one thing for sure is that they did not share in the heritage of the French people. Victor Hugo, Joan of Arc, the French Revolution. Of course, they may have come from French colonies and be of French background and culture, although I dare say quite a few were simply in the nature of modern sport, high-priced imports. But the whole basic tenor of this episode was that we weren't really seeing France's heritage and history and culture on display here, contrary to what I first thought. So the skills, speed and agility of the players was not ethnically French, it was black. So just what does the word heritage mean? I thought about the French Revolution, lauded by millions of people around the world as a great step forward in human progress, the mighty rhetoric of liberty, equality and fraternity. Now, I personally actually hate the French Revolution. I'm often astonished at how wonderful a thing the French Revolution is seen in many quarters. It was a quasi-communist revolution that wound up eating its own under the guillotine, about what I, as a conservative, would expect. But it was French. It belongs to the French people. Black people, I'm sorry to say, took no part in the French Revolution. So when it comes to the word heritage, a term that's often used, but how many people really think about exactly what does this word mean? Well, it's something like a legacy handed down to a person, such as a grandfather's watch, a grandmother's gold ring. It's their patrimony, their posterity. The black players simply did not share in that. Whatever other fine qualities they may have possessed, they did not work the French Revolution. Love it or hate it, it belongs to France. It belongs to the French people. Nor do they have the blood of great French writers or artists running in their veins. You cannot choose your relatives. You cannot choose your history, but it belongs to the French, and to only the French. So what does all this have to do with the death of Queen Elizabeth and the accession of Charles to the throne? Well, let's start with some facts. I always think it's a good idea to get your facts straight in any discussion. Sorry to say, the majority of the Australian population is still of British Anglo-Saxon heritage. It's changing through mass immigration, and the quicker we get rid of the Anglos, the better, because they're so racist and all the rest of it, all of them, they're all the same. But unfortunately, as things stand, the majority of the Australian population still has ethnic and cultural links to the motherland. And apropos of what I was just talking about, our heritage is still, sad to say, British. England's Queen was our Queen. But then most Australians trace their origins to the country of Queen Elizabeth and now King Charles. On the question of republicanism, my stance was always that it was entirely appropriate for us to have a constitutional monarchy under the British Crown for the reasons I just stated. So when the Republican movement started up, I was astonished to find that I was actually technically a monarchist. I'd never actually thought that about myself. Sounded a bit stodgy. But there's an incredible degree of unreality about this subject. Republicans insist that Australia is still under the heel of the British, taking our orders from the Queen, from Buckingham Palace. When will we finally cut the apron strings and be fully independent? This is simply laughable. It is a fantastic distortion of reality. Australia is presently, despite what other people will say, already is a fully independent republic in all but name. When I was growing up in the 1950s, I believe we still had Governor-Generals who were British, who were soon replaced with Australian-born governors appointed by the Australian government. And the vast irony of the portrayal of this, especially by Republicans, blithely ignores crucial realities in their feverish quest for a progressive cause. For example, John Kerr, the Governor-General, the Queen's man, sacked Prime Minister Whitlam back in the 70s. How pathetically colonialist all that was. This is in the realm of fantasy. John Kerr, a Labor man, was chosen by a Labor Prime Minister to be the Governor-General. His dismissal of Whitlam was his own action. It was not only not dictated from Buckingham Palace, it is quite clear that the British royals would have taken no part in Australian political affairs. In principle, the irony is that the events of 1975, far from proving that we were still a colony of Great Britain, proves the complete opposite. From 1975, Australia was plainly, entirely independent of Britain. Unequivocally. Now, getting back to my shocking discovery that I was a monarchist, my position was, or at least developed over time, into the view that becoming a republic or retaining the present system did not really matter all that much, except solely to questions of symbolism. As such, the continuance of the constitutional monarchy in Australia was entirely appropriate to our history. There was nothing particularly wrong with it. On the other hand, it didn't worry me too much if we became a republic, as long as people understand that no fundamental change should be made to our political system. Now, the problem with this whole issue that has dogged discussion of this subject in Australia comes down to one specific point about the mechanics of any proposed change. For example, in previous campaigns for republicanism, one proposal was that we simply change the name, the supposedly fawning colonial designation of the Governor-General, as president, the so-called whiteout solution. And if we must become a republic, that would certainly be my choice. So in 1975, Governor-General John Kerr, who dismisses Prime Minister Whitlam, becomes President John Kerr, who dismisses the government under the powers the President possesses that are equivalent to those of the Governor-General. What has bedevilled the Republican push has been the parallel suggestion that this proposed president be elected by the people. The problem here is that that fundamentally changes our political system. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the Australian people wisely balk at that. So, in conclusion, it is entirely appropriate for King Charles to remain as our head of state. As Prince, he has been seen as a bit of a nutter, that he has already indicated that he intends to modify somewhat his public image and public stance on different things. And as king, he is a different creature and has fallen into the role for which he has been prepared for his entire life, to unify the British people under the monarchy. And he has been met, following the death of Elizabeth, with a lot of unexpected popularity from the people, who, like myself, are prepared to see how he grows into this role as king. And I think everything we have seen about the death of Queen Elizabeth and the subsequent accession of Charles to the throne has taken many people by surprise. Everybody expected that the buffoon prince would quickly disappear into historical memory, be it as a king or otherwise. But a lot of the reaction has brought out underlying sentiments of affection for the monarch, the unity of a people under the monarch, under a supreme ruler, empathy for a royal family who has lost its mother and grandmother. And these are all things that I think have become lost in the modern Western world and have to some extent been rediscovered in the course of these events, which provides a surprisingly different perspective on things, a return to something resembling traditional values of stability and certainty, a refreshing change from the moral and spiritual anarchy that has prevailed in more recent times.